What I have chosen to talk to you about this morning is called choosing the right four-letter word. I hope this doesn't test our friendship, but we'll see. The passages in Galatians and Philippians list the wonderful characteristics of righteous people. In Galatians, they're love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And then in the letter to the church in Philippi, Paul writes of these things that should be filling the minds of righteous people. What is true, honorable, just, pure, pleasing, commendable, excellence, and anything worthy of praise. And in all of these descriptions of these wonderful characteristics of which we aspire to be, there's one word that is missing. And it is the word that I think defines Christianity far too much of the time. It certainly was emphasized a lot in my Christian upbringing, and that word is nice. I'm from the Midwest, where being nice is an art form. It's not saccharine or sticky sweet for the most part. People really do try to be nice to one another. And it is what we teach our children. Be nice, play nice, do nice things for one another. And while this might have a good purpose of teaching us good manners, there's something problematic about the word nice. And because of this, I'm going to suggest that this is a four-letter word that should be banned from the Christian vocabulary. It's not in the Bible. We should not be using it. And I'm going to tell you why. By the end of this message, I hope you will vow never to be nice to me, and I will never be nice to you. Do I have your attention now? Okay. We can be loving, we can be generous and kind for sure. In fact, there are several four-letter words that I think better characterize the Christian life. Love, holy, just, fair, all come to mind. And these are much more consistent with the gospel. They certainly reflect the biblical call to righteousness. But being nice is not about being righteous. And my ultimate argument is there is no story in the gospel that indicates that Jesus was ever nice. So let's get to the heart of the problem with that word. The first problem is that change never happens when nice people are in charge. Problems never get named. Why would that be? Well, characteristic of being nice, if being trained to be nice, as I was, we never ever get into conflict with someone else because that would not be nice, right? It means don't make trouble. Nice is about conflict avoidance. The thinking goes that if you're not nice, then people will fight, and that is the worst possible thing to happen to nice people. Next, as a result of never getting to real change because we're avoiding conflict at all costs, this means it also keeps us hidden and out of view if we so choose. Nice is about public presentation, our public self. Being nice keeps us from being real. But conflict is real, and sometimes things do need to change. But nice people never stand out in front and make it happen. They tend to recede into the background, and this serves a very real purpose. It keeps us out of trouble. Being nice lets us blend into the woodwork, so to speak. No one comes after nice people. So, we don't have to pick up our cross and follow Jesus, do we? Because that would mean that we would have to stand for something that may bother or upset other people, and that wouldn't be nice. So, an activist, a revolutionary, radical, or anyone interested in building the realm of God on earth as it is in heaven is not a nice person. Life is too short and injustice too great to waste time placating other people by being nice. Again, remember, we can be kind and just and fair and holy, and we can be love. All of them are 4-letter words, and those are okay because they're consistent with the gospel of Jesus. We can be real, but being nice keeps us from making waves. It reminds me of the phrase that I have on a t-shirt, of course you believe that, a well-behaved woman seldom makes history. A well-behaved Christian seldom creates justice. Ultimately, nice people are always well-behaved, and it serves the status quo. Sometimes we have to call it like it is, and we have to say, this is not fair, this is not just, this has to change. So, recently I read a very hard-hitting book, Just for White America, written by a black pastor and professor who was not trying to be nice. Tears We Cannot Stop, a sermon to white America. If you have more melatonin in your skin, I invite you to listen in and hold me accountable. What I have to say is for those of us who lack melatonin. He's telling it like it is about race. Michael Eric Dyson says, you don't, quote, you don't get whiteness from your genes. It is a social inheritance that is passed on to you as a member of a particular group. Whiteness is a construct, an invention that keeps white folks ignorant of black life. He says to his audience of white Americans, quote, your whiteness is a shield that keeps you from knowing what black folks must always know. The privilege of white skin is that we can afford to be nice because we can choose to stay above the fray and not get involved. We can choose to ignore the ways that racist systems tear apart immigrant families and keep our brothers and sisters of color impoverished, humiliated, and struggling and in danger. We can do this because our white skin protects us like a shield. Even as people cry out to the unfair ways we have of othering people. Making someone else the other is the problem. And as long as we just are relying on our white skin, we can other anybody else. And as our pastoral prayer said, as long as we rely on just being straight, we can other those who aren't straight. And it goes for class as well. But making someone else the other is the problem. Dyson writes, we must close the distance between the white self and the black other. In fact, viewing black folk or brown folks or gay folks or poor folks as the other is the problem, Dyson says. We can other people and still have a reputation for being nice and moral. But at the end of the day, we have simply gone along with the program of privilege. So our not so nice pastor and theologian Dyson says, of this shield of protection of white skin, this figment of our social consciousness, quote, white privilege creates the space for black oppression. If white folk refuse to name what white privilege for what it is, then it is most likely that you will ignore how black inequality, black suffering exists all around you. Those of you who know better than that must tell other white people what you know. One of my students says, if one stays silent, then one is actually helping racial injustice persist. And then he says, are you ready? It's killing us. And quiet as it's kept, it's killing you too. I come from a long line of Christian folks who are nice. People who never made any waves. They went along with the status quo, never realizing that they were helping racial injustice persist or all kinds of other injustice persist. They never realized that while racial injustice was killing others, it was killing them too. And now let me tell you a personal story of how I think being quiet in the face of injustice, being nice, helped to kill my grandpa. It's a story in a story. The first story. My grandpa didn't tell until his deathbed, and then, like a poison that seeps from the sandy soil, it slowly oozed its way toward the water's edge of disclosure. He had a secret. We must tell secrets lest we do not waken from our sleep. Then, in that eerie silence of our sleeping, we will live out our nightmares. If we do not tell the truth of what we have seen and what is real, it eats away, first at our memory, then at our humanity. The first story begins in the good black dirt that lay 24 inches deep under the Illinois sod. It was there that my grandpa's story begins. He had English and German in his blood and was a farmer's younger son. He had dirt under his fingernails and an 8th grade education. Those folks were usually on the edge between living and starving. Poor folks, not much land, just enough. They kept it together but never looked too far ahead. They never looked around to see what was happening in the world beyond their fences. They kept their eyes on the rows of corn, their hands on the plow, never looked back. He never gave any thought to his white skin. He didn't see any reason to. In the nearby town, there was a woman with an Irish daddy who drank too much and who drove a garbage wagon and sometimes rummaged for what was worth saving to bring home to his large family. It kept the bill collectors away from his door each day, even as he drank his fill every night. They were neighbors to a man who had once been a slave and his wife, who now cleaned the houses of white families who had owned the town. Their dark skin color showed that they too belonged on the poor side of town, together. Poor folks, the whole lot of them. Neighbors, no real difference except for the color. Was that really much of a difference? Of course, for those neighbors, the Kentucky and Louisiana cotton fields were filled with memories of stolen lives and sold-off babies. Days when black bodies had been a property to buy and use, a cheap way to turn a good profit, and white folks had. There was a time when black men hopped onto the Illinois Central that went through that town. It was their lifeline to freedom, far away from those stubborn memories and low-paying, no-paying jobs and Jim Crow. Freedom was north, called Chicago or Canada, anywhere away. Riding on those parallel rails, they came north to build a better life, leaving behind hot cotton fields and their parents' old stories, painful memories of life. Some followed the Santa Fe, the rail line from east-west to cowboy country. The north-south Illinois Central and the east-west Santa Fe were the arteries that dissected my state into 4 ventricular parts. The crisscross of those rails in that town supplying the blood, the lifeblood to the heart of Illinois. The railroads cut through that flat fields of corn and beans and wheat that long ago had been prairie land, home to the buffalo and the red men, both now long gone. Pushed westward toward near extinction, it was a place where German pioneer farmers planted their roots near the newly vacated homes of others. The Irish followed, and an Englishman or two. And so it came to pass that one day when my grandpa was a young man, courting the daughter of the drunk Irishman, he chanced to be on the outskirts of that Illinois town. There were sounds of a small crowd gathering around by the riverside, down by the riverside, where we always lay our burdens down by the riverside. And my grandpa saw down by that riverside there, hanging from the bridge over the water at the end of a noose, the body of a black man, surrounded by the white men who had done the deed. My grandpa stood at a distance, nice man that he was. He bit his tongue. No point in telling. It was not a story for ladies' ears to hear. It was not a story to tell the young ones either. And men, well, men don't like to air such tales, though they know all those things. They do happen, sometimes, in the heart of Illinois. The land that used to be the prairie land that had to be tamed, that had been the home of the unwelcome buffalo, that had to be eradicated, that had been the home of the unwelcome red men, now long gone. Nice people don't talk about forgotten people, or stolen lands, or what they see, if they have eyes to see it. There was no slavery in this northern town. Illinois was a free state. There was not a single cotton field to be found amid the fields of corn, beans, and wheat. Only poor folks, some of them quite nice. Farmers and laborers trying to keep it together, trying to hold on to the slippery slope that lines the edge of poverty. Farmers and laborers trying to be somebody, trying to have a good time now and then whenever they could. Just a little fun. Nice men don't talk about their empty world where fears of inadequacy lurk under the pretense of a strong male facade. My grandpa believed there was nothing he could do about these things. Nothing. He would not tell the story. He never spoke a word, not then, not later, not in defense, certainly not in protest. He was not a truth teller. He was nice. He was a farmer. This is story number one. But there's a story in a story. Remember, the not-so-nice preacher professor says of our white privilege, it's killing us, and quiet as it's kept, is killing you too. You see, no one ever really knew my grandpa, for he never spoke many words. And when I came along 25 years later, he never put himself on the line, never expressed an opinion, never pushed to be out front. And no one ever knew what was going on inside of his head. He spoke only of two things, the weather and the farm. One might call him a loner. He never had too many friends outside the family. No one in the family pried loose the mystery of who he was. No one really knew my grandpa. He seemed nice enough, though. Sometimes when we hold an awful secret long enough, it eats away our humanity, contaminating the soul with its toxic poison. And eventually it oozes poison through the sandy pores of our very being, leaching away generosity and our ability to love and our ability to see what's really happening. And if we live long enough, it hollows out our inner being of its softness, leaving only a bony skeleton of what once was. Our secret is that if we wear white skin, we actually benefit from the way things are, this racial imbalance. That's what we think. We think we can ignore this othering that is based on a melatonin level. That takes away people's life and liberty and pursuit of happiness. But it's also taking away our humanity. When we can turn away from injustice and not see it and say, it's not about me. Being nice keeps everything stable, just like it has always been since white people began exploiting this land and the native peoples in it. Black theologian and Christian pastor James Cone says that, quote, repentance for white people is dying to whiteness, end quote. We must die to our privilege and cast our lot with the other, whom we have othered. He goes on, Jim Wallace, a white Christian pastor, says, white Christians have been separated from God by the idolatry of whiteness. So we're not in this to help somebody else. We're in this struggle for racial justice for our own souls. This is a spiritual struggle. The laying aside of this white shield of privilege, of protection, and repenting of the ways we have allowed injustice to continue in this world. My grandpa could not have saved that man, but he could have told the story. He could have spoken the name. He could have reported the atrocity. Because in the telling, things change. We change. In telling truths, in being real, things happen. Being nice keeps us quiet, complicit, accomplices. Jesus was not nice. He was real. He was love, just, holy, kind, just never nice. Jesus calls us away from the sin sickness of our own souls. Sin sickness that makes us oblivious to the suffering of others. Sin sickness we don't even know we have because our eyes are closed. This sickness that is destroying our very humanity, just as it destroyed my grandpa. Just once, only once, late at night, after 90 long years on the farm, my nice grandpa's tongue grew bold, just once, with my brother. In the few simple phrases, in the manner of one discussing a long-awaited rain that had fallen, he told of the night when long ago on the bridge, on the outskirts of town, where the life-giving arteries that pulse through the heart of Illinois, near the parallel tracks of two crisscrossing railroads that promised freedom, there, down by the riverside, he saw another silenced man. And then, after a lifetime of silence, and after telling his story, my grandpa laughed. If one stays silent, then one is actually helping racial injustice persist. It's killing us, the black man says. And quiet as it's kept, it's killing you too. Let us vow to be kind, true, just, fair, and real. To be love itself, but never, ever be nice. It will destroy us all. Go in peace, be real. Amen.